It is the early 1950s. The Cold War is hardening into something that feels permanent and existential. The Soviet Union and China have demonstrated in Korea and elsewhere that they are willing to go places the West is not yet prepared to follow. American prisoners of war are returning home with their beliefs apparently altered, confessing to crimes they did not commit, praising regimes they once opposed, behaving in ways that intelligence officials cannot explain through any conventional understanding of human psychology. The word being used in classified briefings is brainwashing, and inside the Central Intelligence Agency, a question is being asked at the highest levels, not as a philosophical matter, not as an academic exercise, but as an urgent operational priority. Can the human mind be controlled? Can a person be broken down, reprogrammed, and rebuilt to serve a purpose they would never consciously choose? Can fear, drugs, sleep deprivation, and psychological pressure be combined into a reliable tool for extracting information, creating compliance, and erasing the self? The CIA decided to find out. And it decided to find out on human beings, most of whom had no idea what was being done to them and no ability to refuse. What followed was one of the most extraordinary programs of state-sanctioned human experimentation in the history of democratic government. It lasted 20 years. It involved over 150 research projects. And when the order came to destroy the evidence, most of it was gone before the world could see what had been done. This is Project MKUltra. Welcome back to the darkest experiments. Chapter 6 takes us into territory that is darker in a specific and important way, because the experiments in this chapter were not conducted by rogue researchers operating outside the system. They were funded, authorized, and directed by the system itself, by governments, by intelligence agencies, by institutions whose stated purpose was the protection of the public they were secretly using as test subjects. That distinction matters enormously, because when the state becomes the experimenter and the citizen becomes the subject, the normal mechanisms of accountability, oversight, protest, legal challenge, are precisely the ones that have been disabled. MKUltra is the story of what happens when that disabling is complete. The year is 1953. The newly appointed director of the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence, a man named Richard Helms, formally authorizes a program designated MKUltra, a classified research initiative designed to investigate the use of biological, chemical, and psychological techniques for mind control, interrogation, and behavioral modification. The authorization did not emerge from a vacuum. The CIA had already been running smaller predecessor programs, Artichoke, Bluebird, in the years immediately following World War II. These had drawn with deliberate and documented intent on research conducted by Nazi scientists and Japanese military doctors during the war. The Nuremberg Code, adopted in 1947 specifically to prevent the repetition of what those doctors had done, was less than a decade old when MKUltra was launched. The program was given essentially unlimited classified funding. It operated through a network of front organizations, universities, hospitals, prisons, whose researchers sometimes knew they were working for the CIA and sometimes did not. At its peak, MKUltra involved over 80 institutions and 150 separate research projects spread across the United States and Canada. Its central focus was LSD. The CIA's fascination with LSD was grounded in a hypothesis that the drug's capacity to dissolve the boundaries of the self, to produce confusion, suggestibility, and a profound disorientation of normal thought, might make it a powerful tool for interrogation. A subject dosed with LSD, the theory went, might be more vulnerable to manipulation, more likely to reveal secrets, more susceptible to the installation of false beliefs or the erasure of real ones. To test this hypothesis, the CIA dosed people with LSD, routinely, systematically, and in the majority of cases without their knowledge or consent. Prisoners in federal penitentiaries were given LSD as part of what they were told were medical studies. Patients in psychiatric hospitals were administered the drug without being informed of what they were receiving. Members of the general public were dosed by CIA operatives in social settings. One program, codenamed Operation Midnight Climax, involved agents luring men to safe houses in San Francisco and New York, drugging them with LSD, and then observing their behavior through two-way mirrors. The experiences endured by unwitting subjects were not gentle. LSD in high doses produces terror, paranoia, total dissolution of the sense of self, and experiences that are, for many people, permanently destabilizing. Subjects had no framework for what was happening to them, no preparation, no support, and no knowledge that the experience would end. Some were dosed repeatedly over days and weeks. The most documented casualty of MKUltra was a man named Frank Olson, a civilian bioweapons researcher employed by the U.S. Army who was secretly dosed with LSD by his CIA colleagues during a work retreat in 1953. 9 days later, he fell to his death from a New York hotel window. His death was ruled a suicide. His family has disputed that ruling for 7 decades, and the case has never been fully resolved. LSD was not the only tool in MKUltra's arsenal. The program also investigated sensory deprivation. Subjects placed in isolation chambers, stripped of light, sound, and human contact for extended periods. Hypnosis. Electroconvulsive therapy administered in doses far beyond any therapeutic use. The deliberate induction of amnesia. Psychological torture techniques including sleep deprivation, prolonged stress positions, and relentless verbal assault. Much of this research was conducted not by shadowy operatives but by credentialed academics at respected institutions. McGill University in Montreal, where Dr. Ewan Cameron received CIA funding to conduct what he called psychic driving. The repetition of recorded messages to patients under heavy sedation for days at a time in an attempt to erase and rewrite their personalities. His patients were there seeking treatment for depression and anxiety. They left with shattered memories and permanent psychological damage, having been used as test subjects in a mind control program they never knew existed. In 1973, as Watergate was dismantling the credibility of the Nixon administration and the appetite for government transparency was at an all-time high, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of all MKUltra files. Most of them were gone within days, but not all of them. In 1977, a Freedom of Information Act request by journalist John Marks uncovered a cache of approximately 20,000 documents that had been misfiled in a financial records building and missed by the destruction order. The documents were enough to confirm the broad outlines of the program, the institutions, the methods, the scale, the funding. Congressional hearings followed. The Church Committee, already investigating intelligence community abuses, examined what the documents revealed. The American public learned for the first time that their government had been secretly dosing its own citizens with hallucinogenic drugs, conducting psychological torture experiments in hospitals and universities, and funding research designed to break the human mind. The outrage was genuine and widespread, and largely over time it faded. The program was officially terminated. Some former subjects and their families eventually received settlements. The full picture of what was done remained and remains permanently incomplete, because the director of the CIA burned it. MKUltra is sometimes discussed as a Cold War aberration, a product of a specific historical moment of geopolitical fear when the normal rules were suspended in the name of existential necessity. That framing is both understandable and dangerously convenient, because the mechanisms that made MKUltra possible, classified funding, institutional front organizations, the silencing of oversight, the treatment of vulnerable populations as acceptable experimental subjects, are not features unique to the 1950s. They are features of any system in which power operates without accountability. And power without accountability is not a Cold War invention. The lesson of MKUltra is not that governments are always corrupt or that science is inherently dangerous. It is that both require constant, genuine, structural accountability, not as a bureaucratic formality, but as a moral necessity. The moment a program is classified beyond the reach of scrutiny, the moment its subjects are selected precisely because they cannot refuse or report, the moment its operators believe that the importance of their goal justifies any means, that is the moment MKUltra begins. It does not require the Cold War. It requires only the absence of someone willing to say, "Show me exactly what you are doing, to whom, and why." Project MKUltra ran for 20 years. It involved over 150 research projects, hundreds of unwitting human subjects, and the full institutional weight of the most powerful intelligence agency in the world. Most of its records were destroyed before the truth could be fully known. The people it harmed received, in most cases, no acknowledgement, no apology, and no justice. What it left behind is a standing warning about the distance between what institutions say they are doing and what they are actually doing, and about the importance of never accepting, without evidence, the assurance that the people in charge can be trusted with power that no one is watching. Next time, we stay inside the theme of institutional abuse, but we move from intelligence agencies to university hospitals. A group of schizophrenic patients in remission are enrolled in a study at UCLA. Their medication is taken away, and the researchers settle in to watch what happens next. That is the UCLA schizophrenia study. and it raises one of the most difficult questions in all of research ethics. What does consent mean when the condition you are studying is the very thing that compromises the capacity to give it? Subscribe so you're here for it. Leave a comment. Did anything about MKUltra surprise you? Tell me what you think. I'll see you in the next one.